deep beats and a succulent motion. Like a diamond catching the height when I close my eyes. Spellbinding with my soul, it touched me. It touched me more than once. Where the river builds the gentle waves of Ruchi moments. Yes, it is my river. Yes, it is my river, my Luit so-called Brahmaputra, and it flows. And it flows forever and ever.
Almost every village in the Brahmaputra valley is familiar with the rivers. It's the reason during the colonial era almost every family owned a boat for transport. Country boats were the chief transports in the rainy season. The colonial rulers had seen opportunities in the river. The concept of commercialization of the Brahmaputra valley was depending upon the river. In the later half of the 19th century, the Brahmaputra valley witnessed a number of civil wars. The Muamaria rebels were threatening the age-old stability of the Ahom rule. The rebels also inspired and instigated people in different parts of the valley to defy the ruling dynasty. During this turmoil, for a better administrative control over the situation, Purnananda Boraguhai shifted the center of administration to Dikhoi and converted it as the new Ahom capital. Later it was known as Jorhat, now one of the important townships of the Upper Assam. In the year 1790, the then Ahom king, Gaurinath Singha, took an important decision. To save his kingdom, he appealed for help from the East India Company's authorities, through Mr. Douglas, the Commissioner of Coach Bihar. In response to this, Lord Cornwallis, the Governor General of Bengal, dispatched Captain Thomas Wells. Captain Wells arrived at Goalpara in 1792. On the bank of the river, the king and the Captain Wells took some decisions which changed the course of the history of this land and people. The captain took place at Nagarbera on the Brahmaputra. Advancing further, he suppressed the rebellious elements at Guwahati. Wells also pacified Krishnanarayan, the rebellious prince at Dorong. Sometime later, he advanced to Jorhat and then to Rangpur, where he defeated the Muammariyas and restored the authority of Gaurinath Singha at Rangpur in the year 1794. It was during the reign of Chandrakanta Singha the river saw the first Burmese invasion. About 16,000 men attacked this land with great force. The Burmese army arrived at Jorhat, the Ahom capital. Chandrakanta Singha was retained as king. Baran Chandra assumed power as a minister. The Burmese then returned to their country with large presents. In the year 1819, the valley witnessed the second Burmese invasion under the command of Atai Mingi. The period from 1821 to 1824 is called the period of Burmese rule in the Brahmaputra valley. The Burmese devastation was unexplainable. Atrocities, plundering and killings were common to the valley. This was the dark age of Assam's history. The Burmese also threatened the Goalpara frontier of Bengal. Considering them as a threat to the British territory, Lord Amherst, the Governor-General, declared war on Myanmar on the 5th of March 1824. This is the first Anglo-Burmese war that lasted for nearly 2 years. The British army entered Goalpara frontier of Assam and defeated the Burmese garrisons. Later on, they advanced to Upper Assam. The British occupied Rangpur in 1825 and drove the Burmese and their allies, the Singhfos, out of Assam. The British occupied Assam. An officer named David Scott was appointed as civil officer to look into the civil matters, and Colonel Richards was made in charge of the army stationed there. The British started their administration. On February 24, in the year 1826, the British and the Burmese signed a treaty at Yandabu and ended the war. According to the treaty, the Burmese monarch renounced all claims upon the state. They promised to refrain from all interference with the Principality of Assam and its dependencies. One British officer, Robinson, in an official document stated, "The soil of Assam is exceedingly rich and well adapted to all kinds of agricultural purposes." A new period was waiting for the people of the Brahmaputra valley, as Assam was already occupied by the British during the Anglo-Burmese War. It was kept under British occupation and started introducing British administration. The colonial occupation was chiefly motivated by the lucrative economic elements present here. They calculated huge revenues from this land. The land was fertile, its forest and natural resources were virgin and unexplored. A huge amount of revenues, over 3 lakhs, were estimated from the Lower Assam and 1 lakh from Upper Assam. In the year 1828, 2 years later of the Yandabu Treaty, Lower Assam was annexed permanently to the British Dominion. The Upper Assam was left in charge of Captain Nivelle. The British were always enthusiastic about the great river. It was under the colonial influence. The frontier of Assam was surveyed for the first time. In the year 1765, they recognized and identified the Brahmaputra with the Sampo River of Tibet. This discovery of river routes paved the way for commercial navigation in the Brahmaputra. Thomas Wood of the Bengal Engineers was employed to survey the Brahmaputra and its surrounding. According to Captain Wells, in his expedition to Assam in the year 1792, he started his survey of the river from Gwalpara, where Rennell had left off his survey in 1765. By 1794, he finished his survey of the Brahmaputra and its surrounding as far as the mouth of the river Dikho. The colonial power had understood the value and the prospect of the river in sustaining their presence in the valley. Between 1824 and 1828, Captain Wilcox and Bedford carried out surveys of the river in the Brahmaputra valley. One Lieutenant Bolton also did the survey of the Brahmaputra up to Sadia. In 1840, Francis Hamilton did another survey of some portion of the Brahmaputra in Assam. He did identify the Dihang as a stream of Brahmaputra. Several attempts were made by different individuals to trace the Lohit. Captain R. Wilcox went to explore the upper course of the river. In 1854, 2 French missionaries were killed by the native tribesmen when they penetrated this territory. Between 1824 and 1828, Captain Wilcox and Bedford carried out surveys of the rivers in the Brahmaputra valley. Shortly after that, Lieutenant Burton completed the survey of the Brahmaputra up to Sadia. This green plant had suddenly opened up new avenues for the investment of Britain's surplus capital. In 1821, Robert Bruce, an Englishman, accidentally discovered tea plants. Bishagam, a Singpho chief, introduced him with the popular liquor Fanap. Later on, Mr. Bruce realized that Fanap is nothing but a local name of tea plants. That simple word had changed the history, economy, demography of this land in the later period. In 1824, Charles Alexander Bruce, younger brother of Mr. Bruce, planted tea plants in front of his bungalow at Sadia for the first time. It was absolutely on an experimental basis. Accordingly, Mr. Bruce sent his first sample of tea leaf to the first Commissioner of Assam, Sir David Scott. The first tea cultivation on commercial basis started in 1835 at Sabua.
Well, viewers, we are at Sabua railway station.
A very interesting name.
Yes.
With a very interesting history.
Exactly. Sabua has a very interesting history. I'll tell you why and what. Sabua, the name derives from Sah, that means tea, and Bua means plantation in Assamese. So initially it was Chabua, then later on it is named as Sabua.
Yes. Sabua is also famous for
Yes, tea, of course. Sa. How come the name tea came into the picture? Because Sabua is the first English tea plantation area where the British planted their very first commercial tea garden in the year 1837.
Also, I have to add, Sabua is also famous for his airbase station,
Right.
which was built right back in 1932 during the World War II.
Ahom King Purnadhar Singha also handed over a hill area known as Gabhoru Parbot to Mr. Bruce for the cultivation of tea plants. In 1836, Mr. Bruce dispatched a small quantity of samples of manufactured tea to England. Lord Auckland approved the first 25 samples as good quality tea. Overwhelming with the appreciation of the higher authority, Mr. Bruce dispatched another consignment of 46 chests to England. The year was 1837, but on transit through river waters and exposures, half of the tea were spoiled and rejected. Next year, another 350 pounds of tea in 8 chests were dispatched to London for quality check. The lot was sold at very high price in an auction and was bought by Captain Petting. Lack of transport facility was the main hurdle for expansion of tea industry. The land was covered with thick forest. There were no well-connected roads for transportations of produces. Existing roads were also not suitable for all seasons. The only safer and faster mode of transport available was the waterways. Thus, the river witnessed the first cash crop in the valley in form of tea plantation. In 1839, Assam came under the direct control of the British rule after Colonel White disposed of the Ahom king Purnadhar Singha. In the same year, the Bengal Tea Association and the Joint Stock Company were formed. These two companies got combined and formed the Assam Company. It was the first joint stock company in India. The discovery of tea brought innumerable opportunities to this land and the people. The colonial government made special rules and paved the ways for the foreign investment. They were now competing with the Chinese market, and the Assam tea was getting popular in Europe. The discovery of tea brought a few other changes to this land. It was the tea plantation which the river had witnessed. Thousands and thousands of laborers coming and landing at this soil. Very soon, wastelands in Upper Assam were converted into money-yielding lands. Tea plantation required labor, more and more skilled labor. And to ensure a constant supply of labor, the colonial powers found a solution in other areas of the country. Firstly, they brought in skilled Chinese laborers from Singapore and Penang. But it was not economically feasible. Due to the climatic condition, many died from diseases and rest deserted.
Well, viewers, as you can see, that's Makum Junction behind us. Now, when we see the board, it's Makum. Now, about the name, how does the name came into the picture? The originality of the name. Well, the Makum name is derived from a Chinese word Makam, which means a meeting point. That means Makum is the place which is like the is a meeting point for 3 different towns of Upper Assam, Digboi, Tinsukia and Dumduma.
Yes, and it also signifies a meeting point of 2 different national highways, NH37 and NH38. Whereas initially Makam was the meeting point for the Chinese. Now how do the Chinese come into the picture? Now during the British era, when there was a lot of tea plantations happening in the Upper Assam district, that point of time they hired cheap laborers from China, from the China. Now these Chinese immigrants later on settled down in this place called Makam, and later on this place turned to Makum.
By 1860, the Chinese laborers completely disappeared. After so many failed attempts, the British found its rightful laborers in the tribal people of central India. thousands of laborers were imported from different parts of India. This massive planned immigration had totally changed the demographic pattern of the province. In the period between 1880 and 1901, around 1.3 lakhs of laborers were involved in the tea plantation of the valley. Out of these, 80,000 laborers were from the districts of Chota Nagpur, West Bengal, and United and Central Province. Thus, one of the largest shiftings of laborers in the history of East Asia had begun. And the river was the sole spectator of this event, as most of them were brought on steamboats through this river.